Okay, this is lecture 6. It goes with the book chapter 4.4, and it's going to be about biomes. And a biome is a large area that have characteristics of climax communities. We talked about climax communities a couple of lectures ago. A biome has a distinct climate, which then leads to certain animals. Animals live in the area. Animals and plants live in an area because of the climate. And a biome is mostly determined by the plants that live there because plants can't get up and move around. Where animals, if they have to migrate for food, water, and shelter, they can. Plants cannot do that. So again, a biome is a large area usually determined by the climate that is found there because of the climate that determines the plants and animals. The biome's climate is determined by the altitude and the latitude. There are certain temperature and precipitations, which are the major limiting factor to determine what a biome is. And as you can see in the diagram there, you have the tundra, the taiga, which is like a temperate coniferous forest. There's temperate deciduous forest. There's tropical rainforest. There's also the prairie and savanna and desert. There's aquatic biomes, marine, freshwater, and estuaries. And there's the terrestrial biomes, which we're going to focus on: tundra, coniferous forest, sometimes called taiga, the desert, grassland, sometimes called prairie, deciduous forest, savanna, and tropical rainforest. And here is just a map of the biomes of North America. And here's just another diagram, kind of wet versus dry, cold versus warm. Okay, the tundra, treeless land. There are some shrubs, but there's usually no trees in the tundra. There's long summer days, short periods of winter sunlight. Temperatures really barely ever rise above freezing. In the summertime, maybe for a while, but it's usually really cold. The tundra is sometimes called a cold desert because a desert is an area that gets very little precipitation. So the tundra is known as the cold desert. You think of the tundra, you may think of a lot of snow, but it's so cold that it does not snow. It's dry, and if you have dry, meaning not much humidity, there can't be any snow. So the tundra is a cold desert. There is part of the ground that is permanently frozen, and that's known as the permafrost. So there's always a layer of the earth that is permanently frozen in the tundra. And it's above this permafrost where in the summertime these low-lying vegetations grow. They have to usually have shallow roots because of the permafrost. Like roots can't grow in frozen ground. There's lichen. We talked about lichen earlier. There's something called reindeer moss. The soil usually lacks the nutrients. The decay process is slow due to the cold temperatures. There's usually a lot of mosquitoes in the summer. There's lemmings, weasels, Arctic fox, snowshoe hares, muskox, caribou, the reindeer, maybe moose and elk. And again, the tundra does not have any full-grown trees, just low-lying shrubs. There's the Arctic tundra and the alpine tundra. The Arctic tundra is colder than the alpine tundra. Okay, then we have the taiga, the boreal forest, or most people call it the coniferous forest. It's usually south of the tundra, a little bit warmer and wetter than the tundra. They have long, severe winters, short, mild summers. Think Canada, Northern Europe, Asia. They don't have the permafrost. They do have a topsoil from decaying coniferous needles. Think of pine trees, evergreen, and because of the decaying needles, it's acidic soil, so the soil is really poor in nutrients. You see the cone-bearing trees. That's why it's called the coniferous forest, cone trees with the needles. There's the larch, the fir, hemlock, spruce. Logging can disrupt the taiga. The first trees usually to recolonize are birch, aspen, and other deciduous species, but due to succession, eventually you'd get back to the needle type of trees. And animals, raccoons, bears, lynx, wolves, buzzards, caribou, ox, Arctic fox, elk, moose. Think Minnesota, Rocky Mountains. The desert, very arid region. Again, a desert gets very little precipitation. And when we're talking desert here, we're talking the hot desert. Less than 25 centimeters of precipitation a year. The Atacama Desert in Chile is one of the driest places in the world. You have drought-resistant trees, the mesquites, the cacti, the creosote bush. Animals are going to be lizards, tortoise, snakes, coyotes, hawks, owls, roadrunners, scorpions. You get a lot of the reptiles. Reptiles are cold-blooded animals, so their body temperature is determined by the environment around them. So they have to live in these desert areas to stay warm. They could not survive in the tundra. In the tundra, they would freeze to death. Then you have the grasslands, the prairies, savannas. There is a difference between grassland prairies and the savannas. Savannas have a distinct dry season and a distinct wet season. Grassland and prairies aren't quite that distinct. Another big difference is there are no trees in the grasslands or prairies. There will be trees in savannas. Again, no trees in the grasslands. There will be some trees in the savannas. If you're thinking grasslands, think Nebraska, Kansas, western Iowa, savanna, you need to think Africa. And then you can read the animals and the plants. There's going to be a lot of wildflowers growing in these grasslands and savannas. Buffalo in the United States, the prairie dog. Okay, the temperate deciduous forest, that would be like what we have in this part of Iowa. You have the broadleaf trees, nice topsoil, black bears, deer, squirrels, mice, blue jays, all kinds of birds, hickory tree, oak tree, beech tree, maple tree. Think of Wilson Lake. That is the deciduous forest. Then we have the tropical rainforest, which most of you know it's very humid and very wet. They can get rain every day. Why are there so many species in the rainforest? The temperature, the climate is perfect conditions for growing vegetation and for animal life. It's harder to live in the tundra. It's harder to find food in the desert. But the rainforest has the perfect conditions. Its location near the equator, the warm weather, plants do not drop their leaves, so plants grow year-round. There's multiple possible habitats. It's just very diverse. And there's more layers in the rainforest, allowing for organisms to exist in these many layers. So there's many places for animals to find their niche or their way of life. The nutrients are tied up in the living materials. There's not many nutrients in the soil, so they do have a very poor soil in the rainforest. So a lot of times with a lot of the plants, they actually grow on the trees. Rainforest trees have roots and mycorrhizae that enable them to absorb the nutrients that they need. Trees are cut for their hardwood, like the mahogany, for farming and to produce grasslands for the cattle. So these trees are cut down continuously, which has been a real problem. Because as you know, less trees, you're going to have less of the evaporation from the leaves, less humidity. So by cutting down the trees, you're actually eliminating the rainforest. There will be less rain. The layers of the rainforest. There's the forest floor, then there's a shrub layer, the understory, the canopy, and the emergent layer. The emergent layer is the highest layer. You'll have the tallest of the trees. It looks like an umbrella. You'll find birds, butterflies, monkeys, bats, snakes, and bugs living up in the emergent layer. Then you have the canopy, 25 to 35 meter tall trees. Treetops stop a lot of the light from entering the forest, so the forest is really dark, protects the soil from erosion when it does rain, because it rains a lot. Birds, monkeys, frogs, sloths, lizards, snakes, and again, still many insects. Then you have the understory, trees that reach the canopy. They're waiting kind of until a gap appears so they can get some sun and then they'll grow. They're very skinny, small trees, maybe 20 meters tall. This is the layer that's home to birds, butterflies, frogs, and snakes. As you can see, some of these animals live at all layers. Then you have the shrub layer, grows between the smaller trees in the understory, ferns, and very small shrub-type organisms. And the forest floor, again, it's very dark because of all those layers above it. Only 2% of the sunlight actually reaches the floor. It's a layer of leaves, twigs, dead plants, which rot down quickly to provide nutrients for the plants. Home to invertebrates and microorganisms, which will quickly rot anything that does die. The soil is very sandy with only a thin layer of rotting vegetation. Without the trees, the soil quickly loses its ability to support plants and turns to desert-like conditions. So again, people are cutting down these trees. You're losing the transpiration from the leaves, so less humidity, losing the ability of the soil to support the plant conditions, turning into a desert. It's not good when we cut down the trees in the rainforest. The rainforest floor, of course, you have ferns and mosses, and then you have the animals roaming the forest floor. Tigers, there's elephants in Asia, gorillas, leopards in Africa, tapirs and jaguars in South America.